Today, we're going to be talking about rules of exponents. There are 8 rules for this. Let's start with the first one, wherein a raised to the power of m multiplied by a raised to the power of n is equal to a raised to the power of m plus n. Let's try some examples. X raised to the power of 4 multiplied by x raised to the power of 3. This will be x raised to the power of 4 plus 3. 4 plus 3 is 7, so the final answer would be x raised to the power of 7. The second problem would be a raised to the power of 2 multiplied by a raised to the power of 4. It will be a raised to the power of 2 plus 4. 2 plus 4 is 6. The final answer would be a raised to the power of 6. 6x raised to the power of 3 multiplied by x raised to the power of negative 2. It will be 6 multiplied by x raised to the power of 3 minus 2, because the exponent here is negative 2. So 3 minus 2 is 1, so it will be 6x or 6x raised to the power of 1. It's the same. B raised to the power of 3 multiplied by b raised to the power of 7. It will be b raised to the power of 3 plus 7. 3 plus 7 will be 10, so the answer would be b raised to the power of 10. Let's try some more. 2x multiplied by x raised to the power of negative 3. Now, if there is no exponent shown here, it will be automatically raised to the power of 1. So it will become 2 multiplied by x raised to the power of 1 minus 3. So 1 minus 3 would be negative 2. The answer would be 2x raised to the power of negative 2. Y squared multiplied by y cube. It will be y raised to the power of 2 plus 3. Answer would be y raised to the power of 5. X raised to the power of negative 5 multiplied by x raised to the power of negative 10. It will be x raised to the power of negative 5 minus 10. Negative 5 minus 10 would be negative 15. 3x raised to the power of 5 multiplied by x raised to the power of negative 2. It would be 3 multiplied by x raised to the power of 5 minus 2. So it will be 3x. 5 minus 2 would be 3. Let's start with the second rule. The second rule would be a raised to the power of m over a raised to the power of n. It would be a raised to the power of m minus n. This is like the opposite for rule 1. Let's start with these examples for rule number 2. A cube divided by a squared. It would be a raised to the power of 3 minus 2. 3 minus 2 would be 1, so it will be simply a, or a raised to the power of 1. X raised to the power of 5 divided by x raised to the power of 3. It would be x raised to the power of 5 minus 3. 5 minus 3 would be 2, so the answer would be x squared. X raised to the power of 3 over x raised to the power of negative 2. It would be x raised to the power of 3 minus negative 2. these two positives will make these two negatives, will make a positive. So it will simply be 3 plus 2. So it will be x raised to the power of 5. 2x squared over x squared. It would be 2 multiplied by x raised to the power of 2 minus 2. 2 minus 2 will be 0, so it will be 2x raised to the power of 0. Anything raised to 0 is 1. So it would be 2 multiplied by 1 because x raised to the power of 0 is 1. This is according to rule number 6, which I will be explaining later. So 2 multiplied by 1 is 2. You can also get the same answer by just observing this problem. X squared will cancel each other out. So the left answer would be just 2, which is this. 9y raised to the power of negative 3 over 3y raised to the power of 3. It would be 9 over 3 multiplied by y raised to the power of negative 3 minus 3. First, let's divide this. 9 divided by 3 would be 3, and negative 3 minus 3 would be negative 6. So it would be 3y raised to the power of negative 6. Let's try these examples. 3x raised to the power of 3, y raised to the power of negative 5 over 12x raised to the power of negative 4 multiplied by y raised to the power of negative 1. First of all, if you see two variables together, just focus on one. First, we're going to focus on these x values first because they are the same. So it would be 3 over 12 multiplied by x raised to the power of 3 minus negative 4. 3 over 12 would be 1/4. X raised to the power of 3 minus negative 4, it will be simply 7. And now, let's focus on these y values now. So it would be y raised to the power of negative 5 minus negative 1. Negative 5 minus negative 1 would be simply negative 5 plus 1, which would be negative 4. Combine this together, you will get 1/4 x raised to the power of 7, y raised to the power of 4. Next up is this, 8a raised to the power of negative 5 multiplied by b raised to the power of 8 over 2a raised to the power of 7 multiplied by b raised to the power of negative 3. As usual, let's focus first on the a values. So it would be 8 over 2 multiplied by a raised to the power of negative 5 minus 7. 8 divided by 2 would be 4. And negative 5 minus 7 would be negative 12. And now let's focus on these b values. It would be b raised to the power of 8 minus negative 3. It would be b raised 8 minus negative 3 is 11. So combine these two together, you will get the final answer of 4a raised to the power of negative 12 multiplied by b raised to the power of 11. Let's start with rule number 3. It would be a raised to the power of m all raised to the power of n, it will be equal to a raised to the power of m multiplied by n. Let us start with these examples. b cubed raised to the power of 2. It would be b raised to the power of 3 multiplied by 2. 3 multiplied by 2 is 6. So the final answer be b raised to the power of 6. Next up is x squared, all raised to the power of negative 3. It would be x raised to the power of 2 multiplied by negative 3. 2 multiplied by negative 3 would be negative 6. A raised to the power of 7, all raised to the power of 3. It would be a raised to the power of 7 multiplied by 3. 7 times 3 is 21. So the final answer would be a raised to the power of 21. X raised to the power of 5, all raised to the power of negative 2. It would be x raised to the power of 5 multiplied by negative 2. 5 multiplied by negative 2 would be negative 10. X raised to the power of negative 3, all raised to the power of 6. It would be x raised to the power of negative 3 multiplied by 6, which would be x raised to the power of 18. For this one, it would be x raised to the power of 3 multiplied by negative 4, which would be x raised to the power of negative 12. The fourth rule would be a multiplied by b raised to the power of n. It would be equal to a raised to the power of n multiplied by b raised to the power of n. This shall be the examples for this. 2x all raised to the power of 2. So, first, this let's start with these examples. 2x raised to the power of 2. It would be 2 raised to the power of 2 would be 4, and x raised to the power of 2 will be x squared. 3y raised to the power of 3. 3 raised to the power of 3 would be 3 times 3, which is 9 times 3, which is 27. So it will be 27, and y raised to the power of 3 would be y cubed. 2a squared, all raised to the power of 2. 2 raised to the power of 2 would be 4, and a squared raised to the power of 2 would be a raised to the power of 4. Or you can also just solve it like this. It would be 2 squared multiplied by x squared. This would be 3 raised to the power of 3 multiplied by y raised to the power of 3, and this would be 2 squared multiplied by a squared raised to the power of 2. This was the third rule, so it will be simple. So 2 squared is 4, and just multiply this by x squared. 3 cube would be 27, multiply this by y cube, and 2 squared would be 4, and a squared raised to the power of 2. This will simply be a raised to the power of 2 multiplied by 2, which is a raised to the power of 4. So it would be 4a raised to the power of 4. As you can see, this has the same answers. as this. So yeah, it's just another way to simply solve this. Let's try some more. 5y cubed raised to the power of 2. It would be 5 squared multiplied by y cubed raised to the power of 2. 5 times 5 would be 25, and y cubed raised to the power of 2 would be y raised to the power of 6. 5x squared all raised to the power of 3. It would be 5 cubed multiplied by x squared raised to the power of 3. 5 times 5 would be 25, and multiply that by 5, it would be 125. X squared all raised to the power of 3 would be x raised to the power of 6. For this, it would be 4 squared multiplied by x cubed raised to the power of 2. 4 times 4 would be 16, and x cubed raised to the power of 2 would be x raised to the power of 6. By the way, if you encounter some problems like 3x squared raised to the power of negative 2, this would be 1 over 3x squared raised to the power of 2. This is for rule number 7, which I will be explaining later on. Rule number 5 would be a over b all raised to the power of n would be a raised to the power of n over b raised to the power of n. Let's start with these examples. X over y all raised to the power of 2. It would be x squared over y squared. For this, x squared over y squared divided raised to the power of 2. It would be x squared raised to the power of 2 over y squared raised to the power of 2, which would be x raised to the power of 4 over y raised to the power of 4. 2x over y squared all raised to the power of 3. It would be 2x raised to the power of 3 over y squared raised to the power of 3, which would be 2 raised to the power of 3 multiplied by x cubed over y raised to the power of 2 multiplied by 3, which would be 2 times 2 times 2 would be 8. Multiply this by x cubed over 2 times 3 would be 6. 3x squared over 2y all raised to the power of 2. It would be 3x squared raised to the power of 2 over 2y raised to the power of 2. So it would be 3 squared multiplied by x squared over 2 over 2 squared multiplied by y squared. 3 times 3 would be 9, and 2 times 2 would be 4 over 2 squared would be 4 multiplied by y squared. 6x over 2y squared all raised to the power of 2. It would be 6 squared multiplied by x squared over 2 squared multiplied by y squared raised to the power of 2. So 6 times 6 is 36. Multiply this by x squared. 2 times 2 would be 4, and y squared raised to the power of 2 would be y raised to the power of 4. 3a over b all raised to the power of 4. It would be 3 raised to the power of 4 multiplied by a raised to the power of 4 over b raised to the power of 4. 3 times 3 would be 9 times 3 would be 27, and multiply it by another 3, it would be 81 multiplied by a raised to the power of 4 over b raised to the power of 4. The sixth rule now would be anything that will be raised to 0 is 1. Well, as long that a is not equal to 0, because 0 raised to the power of 0 cannot be determined. Yeah, like this cannot exist, so a here should never be 0. The answers for all of this would be simply 1. Even 999 raised to the power of 0, it is simply 1. And also 1000 raised to the power of 0 is 1. Anything that is raised to the power of 0 is always 1. So keep that in mind. Let's try these examples regarding rule number 6 also. So 2 multiplied by x raised to the power of 0. Keep in mind this will be simply 2 multiplied by x raised to the power of 0. And we all know that x raised to the power of 0 is 1. So it will be 2 multiplied by 1, which is simply 2. For this, 2x all raised to the power of 0. This was in rule number 4, wherein you will distribute 0 amongst these 2. So it will be 2 raised to the power of 0 multiplied by x raised to the power of 0, which would be 1 multiplied by 1, which would be simply 1. For this, 3x raised to the power of 0 all raised to the power of 2. It would be 3 squared multiplied by x raised to the power of 0 raised to the power of 2. So it would be 3 squared is 9. Multiply this by x raised to the power of 0 multiplied by 2. 0 times 2 is 0, so it will simply be 1. So 9 multiplied by 1 would be 9. Rule number 7 of this would be a raised to the power of negative n is equal to 1 over a raised to the power of n. X raised to the power of negative 2 would be 1 over x squared. X raised to the power of negative 1 would be 1 over x, or 1 over x raised to the power of 1. Y raised to the power of negative 3 would be 1 over y raised to the power of 3. This is 2x all raised to the power of negative 1. This can be 1 over 2x. For this, 3x raised to the power of negative 2, it would be 1 over 3x raised to the power of 2. 2a raised to the power of negative 5. This can simply be 2 multiplied by a raised to the power of negative 5, and it will be 2 multiplied by 1 over a raised to the power of 5. But you can simplify this, so it will become 2 over a raised to the power of 5. For this, 6b raised to the power of negative 1. It would be 6 multiplied by b raised to the power of negative 1, which is equal to 6 multiplied by 1 over b. Simplify this, you will get 6 over b. Rule number 8, or the last rule for exponents, would be 1 over a raised to the power of negative n. It would be a raised to the power of n. Now, rule number 7 and rule number 8 are very similar to each other. And that's because when you reciprocate this expression, its exponent here would be reversed. Now, this is positive, but when you reciprocate it, when you move it into the denominator, the exponent sign would change. So, as you can see here, it would be 1 over a raised to the power of negative n. And when you put this on the numerator, the sign here would change to positive. So it would be a raised to the power of positive n. Same as true with rule number 7 earlier, a raised to the power of negative n. When you put this on the denominator, the negative sign would change, so it will be 1 over a raised to the power of n. So I hope you can understand that rule now. 1 over x raised to the power of negative 2. Switch it up and make the sign the opposite, so negative would be positive. So it will be x squared. 1 over y raised to the power of negative 1. Once again, flip it, so it will become y raised to the power of 1, or simply just y. 1 over 2x raised to the power of negative 2. This would be 1 over 2 multiplied by x raised to the power of negative 2. So, x raised to the power of 2, you put it above, so it will be x squared over 2. 1 over 3y raised to the power of negative 3, it would be 1 over 3 multiplied by y raised to the power of negative 3. Put this up to the top, so it will become y raised to the power of 3 over 3. 1 over 4x all raised to the power of negative 2. This would become 4x raised to the power of 2. The reason why it is 4x because of this parenthesis here. This means this was raised all to the power of negative 2. It is different from 1 over 4x raised to the power of 2 because this only means that the x was raised to the power of negative 2. So I hope you can understand the difference of that. And now, for this last example, it would be 1 over 5x all raised to the power of negative 3. The answer here would be 5x raised to the power of 3. So, that is all the rules for the exponents. Thank you all for watching.